Is this the controller you used to play? Is it this one, or is it one of these? It does not truly matter what you answered, because conceptually all the controllers are the same. Look at them, the position of some keys are slightly different, but practically they're all interchangeable because they're all designed the same way. And when I say conceptually, I do not mean it metaphorically. If you play on PC, you can plug any motor controller of any given brand, and Steam will recognize it and make it usable in all games within your Steam library, even wirelessly. When I used the Steam Link back in the days, I connected all sorts of controllers to play Castle Crashers with my friends on the big screen, from the Dualshock 3 to the Wii U Pro controller. But that got me wondering, since the controllers of the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, and the Nintendo Switch 2 are not that different from one another, and neither are they different from the controllers of the previous generation and the one before that one, did we reach some sort of controller plateau? And if so, is that a good thing? Are we ever gonna have a new standard for controllers? First things first, roll the intro. Controllers are a key part of the enjoyment of a game. They quite literally let us control what is happening inside our screens. The more complex a controller is, the greater the possibilities within the games are. When games were simple in their design, simple were the controls. Think of the arcade games that only required a joystick and two buttons to operate. With time, games became ever so more complex, and so did their controllers. Let us look at Nintendo controllers as an example. They evolved from having a D-pad and 4 keys, to later add 2 keys and 2 shoulder buttons, to then add a thumbstick, to later add a second thumbstick and some more shoulder buttons. This latter configuration, seen on the GameCube and also on the PlayStation 2 as well as the first Xbox, quickly became the norm, and it has been kept ever since. This is not to say that we did not have some crazy controllers in between. Think of the Wii Remote, the Wii U Gamepad, the touchscreen, the VR headset, not to mention specialized setups such as driving sims and Kinect. However, between the Wild West that were the 80s and 90s, where every console had their own unique way to design a controller, and today, it is safe to say that we did reach a general consensus. Controllers today have the overall same general layout of having 2 thumbsticks, a D-pad, a set of 4 buttons on the front, 2 bumpers, 2 triggers, and some extra non-gameplay related keys such as home, screenshot or select depending on the brand. They might have some fancy additions such as gyroscope, but vast majority of games that are cross-platform will hardly ever utilize these specific features. The reason why all controllers look alike and have the same layout is simple: we reached peak design. With every technology, it is natural to observe experimentation at the beginning and standardization towards the end, when developers filter out what worked and what didn't. Smartphones are a good example of this happening. They started all wacky and unique, and later converged to the typical shape, layout and user experience you are familiar with. But hold on a second. Peak design? That is a big statement. It would be dishonest to determine these type of controllers to be perfect, since perfection does not exist. Sure, this design is popular, and all 3 major console manufacturers align, but are we players bound to these core controllers forever? The answer is, in my opinion, yes. Wait, hold on a minute. This should be the part of the video where I say it depends, or something corny like that. Did Dandos change my script? He probably did. He didn't. Huh. Then how on earth am I supposed to continue? Jokes aside, I do believe that there is a reason why, for the past 26 years, controllers do not evolve that much. A reason that I gather will be valid for the next 26 years to come, if not more. You see, as introduced earlier, a controller is used to, as the name suggests, control a game. The more complete the game movement mechanics are, and the more complete the controller must be in order to make the required actions possible and practical. In 2D scrollers for the NES, the player did not require a thumbstick or 8 different action keys, just 2 arrows and the jump button. Early 3D games introduced a layer of inputs that require at least a thumbstick to work, preferably 2 to allow maximum degree of camera and character movement in a new 3-dimensional environment. The complexity of a game depends on the controller the player is using, and the complexity of the controller depends on the game it is supposed to control. It is a symbiosis, one depends on the other, and when done correctly, the controller, as we say, just feels right. To achieve this feeling, developers had to try a myriad of different permutations of the controller we use today, the ones I described earlier. But once we reached this peak level of comfortness, the safest thing to do was to keep what worked. The Switch 2 Pro controller and the new Joy-Cons are very distinguishable from the Switch 1 Pro controller and the old Joy-Cons, because Nintendo was satisfied with how they worked and felt. The same can be said from the most known Xbox and PlayStation controllers, since for multiple generations they pretty much looked and felt the same. But video games have not stopped evolving in the past 25 plus years. Maybe not as much as they evolved in the past 25 years before the year 2000, as discussed in a previous video, but definitely there were some evolutions. So what gives? Why are these controllers not that different from the past, and for that matter, between themselves? Why can't we have a new standard for controllers? The answers here become more practical and even bureaucratic. The first holdback in my opinion is the increase of third-party games. You see, the amount of cross-platforming titles has increased noticeably in the past 25 years of gaming. Sure, you have exclusives, but many are the digital products not affiliated with either console brand, from your casual sport titles, to your free-to-play games, to even most GOTYs. To have a modern console with a drastically different set of controls would entail sacrificing many potential bestsellers, since developers only have a certain degree of patience before abandoning a port. The Sega Dreamcast, for instance, is the sole 6th generation console not to have a second thumbstick on the controller, making games for that era either impractical or straight up impossible to play there. Ports on the Wii were also hard to come by, since motion control could only do so much to replicate what the competition had to offer. Hence, it is only but logical that console developers came to a gentleman's agreement on what a controller should include, at least as a bare minimum in their core design. All developers, either from AAA production studios or indie software houses, can rely on the fact that the three major consoles in the market are using this layout, and that they do not need to reinvent the wheel. The sole noticeable half exception I could find of an odd-looking controller is the Steam machines, and to that extent the Steam Deck, that have these looking touchpads on both sides. This decision was made to accommodate PC games that require a mouse. I say half exception because even if these things are present, the rest of the key setup is exactly the same as any other regular controller, thus reinforcing the industry standard. The question regarding game evolution is also fairly easy to answer. While it is true that games have evolved in the past decades, I would argue that it is more the contour of games that evolved rather than their core. What I mean by that is that yes, games have so much going on today when compared to 20 years ago, but the core essence of the gameplay has remained pretty much the same. GTA 6 will be amazing for sure, but it will play more or less the same like GTA 5. Same goes for the next The Witcher, the next Zelda, the next Metro, the next Like a Dragon, the next The Elder Scrolls. Games went from introducing new dimensions to enriching the in-game content. The average player is happy with the current setup of inputs, and would rather have a title with an immersive story, a well-crafted world, and an inspired artistic direction, rather than to have what they would define as gimmicks in their upcoming expensive games. The Wii U is a perfect example of this. My beloved Padone has a regular set of keys to be expected from a controller, plus a whole touchscreen, the gyro, the microphone, the camera, and the infrared, and yet the vast majority of games could and were enjoyed with a regular Pro controller. The gamepad was penalized by, paradoxically, having such a complex controller, one that felt unfamiliar and toyish for the average player back then. All this reinforces the thesis that no, we are probably not going to observe a new set of default controllers. We may have highly specialized controllers such as VR for specific games, but the vast majority of titles of the future will be played with either of these controllers, with very small upgrades. And before concluding the video, let me just say that this is, in my opinion, not a negative outcome. While I'm a huge fan of different control schemes, that is why I still play with my 3DS and my Wii U, I do not mind the fact that developers have found a controller that suits the vast majority of players. If the average player is used to this average setup, it is more than fair that developers want to keep this familiar layout rather than to discourage players to adopt a newer, probably not even fully utilized, set of controllers. Also, this controller is in no way limiting creativity. Donkey Kong Bonanza is an excellent example on how to make this controller scheme very unique and still very familiar to use, with 3 keys in the controller dedicated to punching. So, we will ever see a new base controller? In the near future, probably not, but perhaps that's a good thing for gaming. We did reach some sort of peak design, the one I heavily feature in the thumbnail, a controller that defined a whole generation of gamers, and partially, myself included. Predicting the future is something only a madman would do, but I will place my bet and claim that the typical controller of today you and I are using will not see that many changes in the near and probably even far future. Not because games have stagnated, but because the priorities have shifted elsewhere and past experiments to seek out did not quite go as planned. Still, not to say this is a bit of a pity, there are many games of all sorts of interesting older consoles that make great use of a unique controller, like the Wii, the Wii U and the Nintendo DS, consoles that host the games that could not work without innovations in today's protagonist. Game controllers may remain static, but where there is no innovation in the gamepad, we can only hope to observe it in the digital side. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many controllers times for watching today's video. If you're just like me and have so many controllers that look different but have the exact same input, I hope this video made you realize why that is the case, though it is a bit frustrating they cannot be all used in all consoles. I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci.